Now, I'm going to start out by saying this. I don't agree with every policy that this candidate has on their platform, but I do agree with quite a bit of it. And a lot of people don't know about this guy. Dan Osborne, he's an independent candidate that is running for Senate for the state of Nebraska. Now, what is interesting about Dan Osborne is that, number one, you guys know Nebraska is a red state with the exception of that one blue district. But Dan Osborne is not just an independent candidate. He's also a union dude. That's right. He's a straight up union bro. And it is very close between him and the Republican incumbent in Nebraska. And he's an independent. Let's get into this story, guys. We need some good news. I like the sign of this.
When something was broken at the factory, nobody else could fix it, Dan Osborne is who we call. The CEO took a $2 million bonus and then tried to cut our pay. People have given their lives to this company. Dan stood up, saved my job, saved our jobs. He took on the big corporations for people like us. He's a heck of a mechanic, but an even better guy.
I'm Dan Osborne, and I approve this message. Because if you want to fix Washington, send in a mechanic.
That was a new ad from independent candidate for the U.S. Senate in the state of Nebraska, Dan Osborne. That race in deep red territory appears to be no longer a safe bet for two-term incumbent Republican Senator Deb Fischer, with the Cook Political Report recently shifting the race from solid to likely Republican. Senate Republicans are now being forced to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on that race. Osborne is a union industrial mechanic who led a strike at the Kellogg's cereal plant in Omaha back in 2021, and a victory by the 49-year-old Navy veteran would throw a wrench into the GOP's plans to take control of the Senate next year. And Dan Osborne joins us now. Dan, thanks so much for being with us this morning. So tell us a little bit about why you think your candidacy, so unlikely to start, is beginning to really resonate.
Well, thanks for having me on. You know, I did serve in the United States Navy. I served in the Nebraska Army National Guard. I've always felt compelled to service. And I did, I ran that strike at Kellogg's. 500 people took my friends and their family out into the great unknown, not knowing if we're going to have a job at the end of it. But we certainly felt we were on the right side of history.
Let's pause here and let's go ahead and interject. So here is a candidate that is not your usual Harvard law graduate, not a lawyer, wasn't a judge, doesn't have a father or some other family member that was a politician, just a regular dude, a mechanic, someone who led the Kellogg strike in Nebraska. Now, when the Kellogg workers went on strike in Michigan, my comrade Rome from RBN, he interviewed them on the ground. He went to the strike lines, and I believe he brought Trevor, who was the leader of that one in Michigan. He brought him on to the show later on as well. And I got to tell you, this is what Kshama Sawant talks about. Kshama Sawant, former city councilor of Seattle, started workers' strike back. This is what she did. You start on the ground first and you build on the ground with a workers' movement. And then if you want to run for office, you run for office. And I would argue that's probably the reason why the race is so close between himself and the Republican incumbent. Because the people looking at Dan, they're like, he was the one who fought with us. He was on the ground with us. When we were going on strike, he was leading the strike. He was fighting for the workers because he is one of us. And this is incredibly important. This is why I keep telling people, you need to get rid of all the bougie, Ivy League graduate politicians. We got to be done with that. These people have no connection to the everyday working class people. And I've said this over and over again. They don't. The only time they know these people is when they need to get their car fixed or they're going through the drive-through. So Dan he's one of them. One of them. Now, again, I don't agree with everything on his platform, and we're going to get to that. But the fact that the race is as close as it is and he's an independent, what does that tell you? It tells you that when you build on the ground with the people, Whether you're independent or third party, you can make it happen. Let's continue. I hope this story inspires people for real.
And now I'm running as a independent for United States Senate. And I'm an independent because I am frustrated with both sides catering to their extremes. We've seen just recently a farm bill, not getting done. We're seeing a border bill not getting done. And I think Robin Williams said it best when he said our elected officials should be wearing NASCAR-style jackets with patches of their sponsors so we know how they're going to vote. And certainly Senator Fisher, my opponent, is no different. She's got a lot of patches on her jacket, and if you look at her voting record, you can, it's right down the line.
So Dan,
if you're watching this and you like what you're seeing, if you like what we're doing here in Nebraska, go to osbornforsenate.com. And my average donation is $35. And we've raised over $4 million, and we haven't taken a dime of corporate money because we're being different.
Pause. Hasn't taken any corporate money. A candidate who's running as an independent hasn't taken any corporate money, is close in the polls with the incumbent Republican. So, and this is the thing I think about like Bernie Sanders and members of the squad that pissed me off. Because of the popularity that they have, they could have left the Democratic Party any day now and just started a third party movement or ran third party or independent, and they would still win because they're already popular now. Dan isn't even probably not known to a lot of people outside of Nebraska. But you mean to tell me people who had that popularity, especially someone like AOC has millions of followers, if she were to say, I'm leaving the Democratic Party, I'm doing a third party thing or independent thing, and here's the reason why, do you think people wouldn't follow her? They would. And that's how you know it's all about their political career.
I don't want to be beholden to a corporation. I want to be beholden to the people in Nebraska. That's it.
No patches on your jacket. So Dan, you have said you will not be a member of either party in the U.S. Senate, but would you caucus with either Democrats or Republicans?
Yeah, that's a good question, and thanks for asking that. George Norris was the last independent senator from Nebraska. He helped create the nonpartisan unicameral that we enjoy in Nebraska today, and he did not caucus with anybody his last term. So there is some precedent set. I don't think the two-party system is working for me or my family or my friends or their family, and I certainly plan to not caucus with either party.
Dan, everywhere
I hope if he does win, I hope he keeps it that way, because what's the point of being independent if you're going to caucus with one of the other parties just automatically, right? So Bernie Sanders does that. There is a senator from Maine, I think that's Ainsley King. I believe he does this as well, like just caucus with one of the other parties. I mean, to me, then you're not really being independent. So if he does win, I hope he keeps that mindset. And there's a reason why I'm saying that. Right now, the Republicans have the lead in the Senate. They have 50 seats. I believe there's 5 seats that are left open. Last time it was 6. I believe there's only 5 now that are left to be determined. And if all of those, let's say 4 of those seats go to the Democratic Party, and let's say that Dan wins this independent seat, both parties would have to go to him to get him to say, hey, Dan, will you sign on and pass this for me? Democrats would have to do that. Republicans would have to say, hey, Dan, will you sign on and pass this for me? And if he doesn't want to agree with either one, he can do that. That's leverage. That's something that Bernie isn't really using. Let's go on a little bit more.
I hear people complaining, most people complaining about the two parties, say they don't represent them. And yet anytime anybody talks about running as an independent, they're told by all the political powers that be, well, that's a great idea, Sonny, but you're never going to get anywhere with that. It's impossible to do. I'm sure
you do that too, Joe. Joe said, people tell independent candidates that it's impossible, you can't do it. You're those people. You're the one telling people that.
You heard those complaints. Tell me, Why has it worked for you? And why could it work for other people out there that are watching right now who are sick and tired of this two-party monopoly, this duopoly that, again, rewards extremism?
Yeah, I do feel like we're in a two-party doom loop right now. And imagine, if you will, for a second, the ramifications on American politics if Nebraska elects an independent mechanic to the United States Senate. The ramifications could be amazing. It would tell people that, first of all, you don't have to be a cryptocurrency billionaire to run for office. So teachers and nurses and plumbers and carpenters, people who stare at a computer screen for a living, farmers, I don't want to leave anybody out, but they could also realize that they could run for higher office the way the framers of the Constitution intended it, right? You come from your farms, come from your factories, do a term or two, and then go back. That's the way it was designed, and that's the way I think. And that's one of the main reasons I'm doing this, is to show it can be done, and also be beholden only to the people that elect me.
Okay, so I want to chime in here because I want to prove a point about something. Justice Democrats could have done this. And instead of being Justice Democrats, maybe the party or the organization could have been Justice People or Justice for All. I don't know. Although Cornel West now has a Justice for All party. So anyway, it could have been named something else, right? And instead of putting these progressive candidates in the Democratic Party, what they could have done is all of those people could have ran as independent or third party candidates. And in fact, it probably would have been better if Justice Democrats named something else, would have formed into a third party. Because like I said, for the people who say there's no way they would stand a chance running as an independent or third party against the Democrats or the Republicans, et cetera, Dan is proving that's not the case. So do you see why this story is incredibly important? Because you can do it. You really can. And then think about that. What could have been if they would have formed Justice Democrats into like Justice for Everybody, third party or something like that? And they had those candidates as third party candidates and they got in. Remember, Justice Democrats received a lot of money. They received millions of dollars. So don't pretend like they didn't have any money. And you had that and you would have built that party up by now. That party probably would have been on fire. That party by now probably would have been unstoppable. And that's what I'm saying. And this is why I go back to the situation that I said before about Bernie Sanders choosing not to leave the Democratic Party after 2016, after they cheated him. If he would have done that and started a third party movement, imagine where that would be today, especially considering the fact that he was already a popular person. It's not like nobody knew who Bernie Sanders was, but I want to show you just how close this is, because I was like, say what? We have got to pay attention to these Senate races. Okay. I know I've been talking a lot about the presidency, but we are going to switch our focus within the next couple of days to focus on what's happening in these Senate races, because let's be real. They pass legislation, right? They're the ones that decide whether or not legislation is going to pass. Even if it passes the House, doesn't mean it's going to pass the Senate. And if it doesn't pass the Senate, then it doesn't make its way to the president's desk. So I think it's important that we have a little civics lesson here and we focus our attention a little bit on the Senate as well. So if we go to Nebraska, which is where Dan's race is located, you can see here, this is how close this race is. This is insane. Who's ahead in Nebraska Senate general election? And Fisher is the incumbent with 44.1%. And Dan Osborne has 43.4%. That's how close this race is, ladies and gentlemen. And that is as of October 18th, which is just 2 days ago. So this is what I was telling people, like, it can be done, Now, do I agree with everything that is on Dan's platform? No, I don't. But let's go through it. Ain't nothing to it but to do it. Nothing to it but to do it. So here's his platform. Cut taxes for small businesses and the middle class. Yeah, I can get behind that. I can get behind that. A secure border for a secure country. This one we're going to look at a little bit. Legal immigration helped build this country and is critical to Nebraska's economy. Illegal immigration creates a pool of cheap labor with no rights and is detrimental to every American worker. As a senator, I won't just talk about securing the border. As independent, I'll be uniquely positioned to bring together a majority to get it done. So I think a lot of people have been talking about the border, and they do. It seems like on both sides, Democrat and Republican, do want a secure border. Here's another one: protecting Social Security for every American citizen. I can get behind that. I told you guys before, I don't know if I will even receive Social Security by the time I'm old enough to get. I don't even know. We don't know what's going to happen. But protecting Social Security, I can get behind that. Let's go on. Let's go on. And you guys can let me know how you feel about this as well. Standing up for law enforcement and protecting public safety. Nope. That's where you lose me, Dan. You guys know I'm not down with the po. And he goes into a little bit of detail here, where he says, as a veteran, I know that foremost responsibility of every elected official is the safety and security of our communities. We owe tremendous debt to all of you who have given ultimate sacrifice. He says he'll make sure Nebraska law enforcement and first responders always have the resources they need. And you got to be careful with that, because having the resources that they need can also, transfer into another cop city. So you have to be careful with that. I'm not pro popo. You guys know that. This one is big. Yes. Guarantee a right to repair for farm equipment, cars, and electronics. 100% yes. Without a right to repair their own equipment, farmers and ranchers effectively locked into costly lifetime contracts with manufacturers. And he brings up the example about the John Deere agreement. And I do want to say to that point here, absolutely. We passed right to repair here in Massachusetts. Yes, it does make a difference. The contracts are ridiculous. They are costly. And I think every state should have that right to repair law. I think that helps small businesses. So that's another one. Yes, right to repair is huge. I agree with that one. Let's go on. Support our veterans. Fully fund the VA to clear out its backlog and ensure claims are processed in a timely manner. I don't even think the problem is that the VA doesn't have the funding. I think the VA just drags their feet. I mean, my dad's been through the VA. I've talked about this before, but he wants to support the veterans with comprehensive job placement and job training. Okay. No more soldiers on food stamps. This is a big, so raise servicemen pay. A lot of people don't realize this, and I got to point this out. People assume sometimes, like, just because you're in the military, that you're not living in poverty. There have been a number of families. I remember when I was growing up, a number of military families that were on food stamps. And when I tell this to people, they seem to be somewhat surprised. It depends. Like, if you are a lower rank and let's say you have 4 kids or whatever, I mean, especially like if you're in the Army, you're not making a lot of money. So yeah, you may have housing on base, but you're not making much, and you have kids you have to take care of. So yeah, that's not an uncommon thing for servicemen to be on food stamps. I don't think anyone in this country should have to be on food stamps. If everybody was paid a living wage and we took care of people in this country the way that we're supposed to, we wouldn't have to worry about this. So I can understand where he's coming from with that. However, I hope that he doesn't think that those programs should be removed. And that is a question I would ask him about that. Level the playing field for family farms and ranches. And he's talking about comparing that to, again, adding in our right to repair, which again is huge. And he's talking about the comparison between those family farms and, of course, like those large industries. In profiteering off senior health care. The entry of private equity into our healthcare system has been, for the most part, a disaster, and seniors are paying the price. Okay, and I get where he's coming from with this, but I would go a step further, and I would say you should approve of universal healthcare. Not just about seniors. Everybody needs healthcare in this country. So I would push him to take that a step further. And another one here, strong public schools, legalize cannabis. I can get behind that. And I don't even smoke, but I can get behind that. Of course, we passed it here in Massachusetts. End wasteful government handouts to the pharma industry. So that's when he brings up the pandemic. I think a lot of you that were very critical of the pandemic, you can probably get behind this one. Stop handing huge subsidies to super profitable pharmaceutical companies. Lower taxes on overtime wages. I can get behind that. I can get behind any type of lower tax. Lower all the taxes. Protect the middle class jobs and wages. I would frame that differently. I would say instead of middle class jobs, because again, middle class is a very small segment of the population today. Most people are not middle class. So I would just change that to protect jobs and wages for all, right? Reform railroad safety. So this makes sense. He's a union guy. So he's obviously going to support what the railroad workers have been fighting for. And I've interviewed railroad workers on the show about that. Keep government out of our private lives. Now let's see where he goes with this. He says that he supports the Second Amendment. And he goes on to say, is this abortion? I do not support extreme national measures to ban abortion. So this is another one in case some of you were wondering. He doesn't support that. He said he respects the moral convictions of all Nebraskans, but he believes in limited government. And I do not believe the federal government is capable of resolving this issue. Under extreme federal bans, abortions will still happen. We need to focus on the root cause of reducing unwanted pregnancies. This is interesting. I oppose discrimination for any reason and thinks people's private lives are no business but their own. This is interesting, you guys. Interesting. And the last one here, pass congressional term limits. And I think you all know I can get behind term limits. I can get behind term limits. So some of those propositions there, I do agree with him about, and then some of them I obviously do not agree. But let's see where this race goes, and we'll keep an eye on it. Imagine if he wins.